Hello and welcome to Indus News. Live from Islamabad, I'm Naila Shuja and these are the headlines. Pakistan has warned India against taking any steps in occupied Kashmir that might imperil regional peace and security. At a weekly press briefing, the Foreign Ministry spokesperson Zahid Hafiz Chaudhry said Pakistan will continue to oppose Indian attempts to change the demographic structure and the status of the occupied valley. In Germany, a man and a woman have been killed in a shooting spree in the western town of Esfel camp. Police have launched a manhunt to arrest the shooter. Russia has warned Ukraine against joining NATO, calling the move red lines for Moscow. Kremlin spokesperson Dmitry Peskov made the remarks the day after the U.S. and Russian presidents met for a summit in Geneva. Peskov said Russia's ambassador would return to Washington soon. Brazil has registered nearly 3,000 deaths from COVID-19, while over 95,000 people tested positive overnight. In India, more than 2,300 people lost their lives over the virus, and over 67,000 tested positive in the past 24 hours. Meanwhile, Pakistan has reported 46 fatalities and over 1,100 infections overnight. Globally, the virus has claimed more than 3.8 million lives and infected over 177 million people so far. For more news and details, stay tuned. We'll be right back after a short break. Welcome back. Pakistan has warned India against taking any steps in occupied Kashmir that might imperil regional peace and security. Foreign Minister spokesperson Zahid Hafiz Chaudhry said this at a weekly press briefing in Islamabad. Chaudhry said Pakistan will continue to oppose Indian attempts to change the demographic structure and the status of the occupied valley. He said Indian-occupied Kashmir is an internationally recognized disputed territory and called on the international community to take immediate cognizance of the human rights situation in the territory. The spokesperson said India's unilateral and illegal actions in Kashmir violate international law and UN Security Council resolutions. He said Islamabad will continue to support the Kashmiris in their just struggle for the realization of their right to self-determination. The Taliban claimed to have seized the SHANGHAI district in Afghanistan's southern Zabul province. A Taliban spokesperson said 2 security checkpoints of the government forces were also captured in northern Baghlan province. The Afghan government has yet to comment on the Taliban's claims. The Afghan Defense Ministry said 26 Taliban fighters were killed and 13 others wounded in airstrikes on Saripol highways. In another attack, at least 4 people have been killed in a car bomb blast near a police headquarters in the northern Balkh province. Meanwhile, Amnesty International called for investigation of deliberate killing of civilians in Afghanistan. It said the Afghan authorities must investigate and bring the perpetrators of the brutal series of attacks to justice. Russia has warned Ukraine against joining NATO, calling the move red lines for Moscow. Kremlin spokesperson Dmitry Peskov made the remarks a day after the U.S. and Russian presidents met for a summit in Geneva. In an interview, Peskov said Russia's ambassador would return to Washington soon. He said soon the 2 countries will also launch the expert dialogue mechanisms on cybersecurity issues. The spokesperson noted that the United States does not directly blame the Russian authorities for the latest cyber attack. He added that this is a very important aspect and that Russia positively assesses that fact. Meanwhile, Russia's Deputy Foreign Minister Sergei Ryabkov said Moscow expects arms control talks with Washington to start within weeks. European Union's foreign policy chief Joseph Borrell says the bloc's ties with Russia are further deteriorating. In a statement, Borrell gave a 5-point strategy for improvement, which includes constraining yet engaging with Russia. He hoped that it is not going to be necessary to put more sanctions on Russia, adding it will depend on the evolution of the events. Borrell noted sanctions are also harming the ordinary people. He said Russia remains the European Union's largest neighbor and it is an important global actor. The vice president added Brussels needs to be realistic and prepare for a further downturn relation with Russia. He added a renewed partnership to realize the full potential of a close cooperation with Russia is a distant prospect. The United States President Joe Biden and his Russian counterpart Vladimir Putin have agreed to hold talks on arms control. This was agreed during the first meeting between the two leaders since Biden took office in January.
The U.S. and Russian presidents held their first summit in Geneva that highlighted their deep discord on human rights, cyber attacks, election interference, and Ukraine. In a joint statement after more than 3-hour-long meeting, both the leaders said, "A nuclear war cannot be won and never be fought." Biden said in his press conference he will continue to raise the issues of fundamental rights with Russia. He said there will be serious consequences if Kremlin critic Alexei Navalny dies in prison. Biden also demanded Moscow crack down on cyber attacks emanating from Russian soil. Earlier in his presser, Putin described the summit as quite constructive. He announced that both sides have agreed to return diplomats expelled from each other's countries. Putin claimed cyber attacks are coming from the U.S. and two sides will hold consultations on the matter. He also said Russia and the U.S. will hold talks on possible changes to the New START arms control treaty.
And the Israeli troops have murdered another Palestinian youth in the occupied West Bank. Medics say 16-year-old Ahmed Beni Shamsa was shot in the head during the protest in Nablus City. The residents of the Beta town were protesting the establishment of a settlement outpost on their land. Israeli army fired live bullets at the unarmed demonstrators. This comes a day after Israeli troops shot dead a Palestinian woman near the village of Hizma, northeast of Jerusalem. The Euro-Mediterranean Human Rights Monitor has slammed Israel's halting of mail service in Gaza. It said Israel's arbitrary suspension of service represents an unacceptable and illegal act of collective punishment against the civilians. It submitted a complaint to the Universal Postal Union and explained how Israel has further tightened its 15-year-long blockade. The Monitor said Tel Aviv decided to impose more restrictions on what it allows in and out of the enclave since Israel's war on Gaza last May. It said Gazans are unable to receive or send passports and cannot travel in even dire humanitarian circumstances. Bahrain says it is talking to Israel's new government to learn about its policy on settling the Palestinian issue. In a statement, the foreign ministry said communication are driven by an approach-based dialogue and cooperation. Earlier, Bahrain's Crown Prince congratulated Israel's Naftali Bennett on becoming the new prime minister for a 2-year term. Manama agreed to normalize ties with Tel Aviv in September, becoming the second Gulf country to do so. France says significant disagreements remain in the Vienna talks to revive the 2015 Iran nuclear deal. A foreign ministry spokesperson called on participants to take brave decisions quickly. In a statement, von der Mol warned that time is not on anyone's side. Meanwhile, Arab foreign ministers have demanded to consider Iran's ballistic missile program in the talks. They stressed the need to include Gulf countries in the dialogue. Earlier, the UN nuclear watchdog said there is no prospect of a deal until a new Iranian government takes office. Brazil has registered nearly 3,000 deaths from COVID-19 and more than 95,000 cases overnight. Globally, the virus has claimed over 3.8 million lives and infected nearly 177 million people so far. More in this report.
As the coronavirus cases tumble and nations reopen, the most crucial aspect, the inoculation, faces major roadblocks. Skepticism continues to pose the biggest hurdle, while sluggish supplies and worrisome variants keep gaining a bigger foothold. Australia's expert immunization panel is set to recommend restricting the use of AstraZeneca's vaccine only for people over 60. New Zealand's Prime Minister Jacinda Ardern said all those eligible in the country will be inoculated by the end of this year, as she announced details of a vaccine campaign.
From the end of July, we will enter a new phase of our vaccine program, when we start receiving the bulk of our vaccines and are able to broaden the rollout considerably. There are some caveats here that I want to share. We know we'll be receiving more vaccine than we have to date, but we still won't get all of our supply at once.
Over in Europe, Britain has reported the highest daily increase in its coronavirus cases since February. Germany's CureVac said interim data from late-stage testing shows a comparatively low effectiveness in protecting people against COVID-19. Meanwhile, the European Union has approved an $84 billion COVID-19 recovery plan for Spain.
Indeed, today I'm very happy to announce that the European Commission has decided to give its green light to Spain's recovery and resilience plan. This comes indeed after an excellent cooperation. I really want to thank you for that. An excellent cooperation with the Spanish authorities.
The EU has agreed to add the US to the list of countries from which the bloc will allow non-essential travel. A senior Chinese epidemiologist said the US should be the priority in the next phase of investigations into the origin of COVID-19. This came after a study showed the disease could have been circulating there as early as December 2019. Meanwhile, India has registered more than 2,300 deaths and over 67,000 cases in the past 24 hours.
Pakistan has reported 46 more COVID-19 fatalities in the last 24 hours, as the toll reached over 21,800. The country's health ministry says over 1,100 people tested positive overnight. It said more than 945,000 people have tested positive so far in the country since the pandemic began. Meanwhile, Islamabad has also administered more than 12 million vaccine doses so far. Pakistan's Foreign Minister Shah Mahmood Qureshi has arrived in Turkey to attend the Antalya Diplomacy Forum. The Ministry of Foreign Affairs says Qureshi was invited by his Turkish counterpart, Mevlut Cavusoglu. Qureshi will participate in a panel discussion on regional cooperation in Asia, along with other foreign ministers from the region. He will also hold bilateral meetings with his counterparts and key regional and international partners on the sidelines. The foreign minister will highlight Pakistan's vision for regional cooperation, economic development, and connectivity. South Korea and Spain have agreed to upgrade their ties to a strategic relationship. South Korea's President Moon Jae-in and Spain's Prime Minister Pedro Sanchez met in Madrid. Moon is on a 3-day official visit to Spain to celebrate 70 years of bilateral relations. Sanchez and Moon pledged to cooperate especially in the economic, commercial, and investment fields. Spain confirmed that both sides will expand cooperation on renewable energy, infrastructure, and sustainable food issues. They also agreed to work together to return bilateral trade and investment to pre-pandemic's level.
Today, I'm delighted to announce our two countries have upgraded our cooperation into a strategic partnership. So now we will make a new future for common prosperity in Asia, Europe, and the whole world through strengthened cooperation based on our friendship and trust developed in the past 7 decades.
In Sweden, the far-right Sweden Democrat Party has submitted a motion of no confidence against Prime Minister Stefan Löfven. The move was triggered after the Left Party said it will no longer support Löfven, who has headed a minority coalition since the election in 2018. If passed, the vote can lead to a snap election or a caretaker government until regular elections due next year. Löfven has relied on support from the Left Party and two center-right parties since winning a second term in office after the 2018 election. A vote of no confidence will need a simple majority in the 349-seat parliament to pass. Northern Ireland's largest parties have agreed to back Paul Givens as a replacement for the former First Minister Arlene Foster. The Democratic Unionist Party needs to secure the support of other parties in power-sharing government till Monday. The Sinn Féin party has conditioned the nomination with the adoption of the agreement made with Britain earlier. In a statement, party's leader Mary Lou McDonald said Sinn Féin will participate fully in the five-party executive. The largest Irish nationalist party, Sinn Féin, said Michelle O'Neill would resume her post as Deputy First Minister. Britain's Northern Ireland Minister Brandon Lewis said he expects the ratification of the new First Minister to take place later today. French President Emmanuel Macron says American and Chinese technological markets lack innovation. Addressing a panel of startups in Paris, Macron called Washington and Beijing's tech markets are financing nonsense. The French president asserted that Paris is considered more business-friendly and innovative now. He said the EU could easily attract investment away from these markets owing to the high liquidity. Macron is pushing for Europe to create 10 technology giants worth $120 billion each in valuation by 2030. In Germany, 2 people have been killed in a shooting spree in the central of the town of Western Espelkamp. Police said a woman was among those killed. They added that the shooter was on the run. Special police commandos were attending the scene. At least 60 police officers have been injured in riots over a building being occupied by squatters in Berlin. Police said that they were attacked by stones from some 200 people from the street and the roof. The residents were protesting against a court decision to let the police inspect the occupied building. The residents attacked the police when they attempted to secure the area for a fire inspection. Supporters of the residents also set up barricades and set them on fire to repel the police activity. Police say they will have around 200 officers in place on Thursday to allow the fire service to try again. It's now time for a short break. Stay with us. Welcome back. Nigeria's Boko Haram has confirmed the death of its chief Abubakar Shekau, who reportedly died during infighting with a rival faction. In a video message, a top Boko Haram leader urged his faction's commanders to remain loyal despite the loss of their historic chief. Shekau reportedly killed himself last month rather than surrendering after a rival group attacked his base camp in the northeast Borno state. ISIS commander Abu Musab al-Barnwai says Shekau killed himself while on the run from their fighters. China's first manned mission to its space station has successfully docked with a core module, Tianhe. The Long March 2F rocket carried Shenzhou 12 with 3 astronauts on board. The spacecraft blasted off from Yaquan Satellite Launch Center in northwestern Gobi Desert. China's manned space agency says the spacecraft docked with Tianhe after entering the orbit. The trio will spend 3 months in space conducting experiments, testing equipment, and preparing for the station for expansion. This will be China's longest crewed space mission to date and the first in nearly 5 years.
As it is our first time to operate a 90-day stay in space, we have tried a 33-day stay before, which needs a qualitative improvement this time from all aspects. 3-month flight is a long-term human-crewed space flight, which requires astronauts to stay in a relatively narrow and confined environment, and it takes time to adapt to the weightlessness.
A U.S. hospital has administered the first infusion of an expensive and controversial new Alzheimer's drug from Boehringer Inc. A 70-year-old retailer from Rhode Island is the first to get the drug, priced at a whopping $56,000 per year. At-home was approved based on evidence that it can reduce brain plaques, likely to contribute to Alzheimer's. However, there is no proof that it slows the progression of the fatal mind-wasting disease. The United States Food and Drug Administration approved the drug for all patients despite the strong objection of its advisory panel. Aduhelm has only been tested for patients in the early stages of the disease. It is the first new medicine for the disease in nearly 2 decades. In the United States and Australia, several firms and banks were hit by a major internet outage that caused the suspension of operations. The Reserve Bank of Australia cancelled its operation to buy long-dated government bonds because of technical difficulties. The outage disrupted customer accounts and financial transactions before some services were restored. Websites of major U.S. airlines, American Airlines, Southwest, United, and Delta Airlines also experienced disruptions. It was not immediately clear if the outages in both Australia and the United States were linked. A turtle conservation program in Dubai rescues and rehabilitates sick hawksbills that wash up on the UAE shores during the winter. More in this report.
Hawksbill turtles are an endangered species with an estimated 8,000 nesting females worldwide. According to the program, these turtles' population has dropped 87% over the last 30 years. A marine and environment manager says turtles get critically endangered over the summer months and in winters, saying hawksbill wash up on shores.
From around March until June, the critically endangered hawksbill turtles come to our beach to lay their eggs. In the winter months, when the water's very cold, these same turtles that have hatched earlier in the year struggle with the temperature fluctuations and end up washed up on our shores.
The rescued turtles are then transported to Burj Al Arab Hotel. An aquarium team puts them through a rehabilitation process to prepare them for release back into the wild. They are moved to the state-of-the-art turtle lagoons, where the animals spend the last part of the rehabilitation process. The team monitors their general health and how they acclimate to the local conditions.
The last part of the project is the release back into the wild. We put satellite transmitters on some of the turtles to understand what is the success of the rehabilitation project and also to see how the turtles migrate and to learn more about the turtle biology.
The program has saved over 2,000 sea turtles since its foundation in 2004. World Sea Turtle Day, which celebrates one of the oldest species to ever exist, falls on 16th of June.
3 of the world's top wingsuit flyers have performed the first ever flight over Lebanon's highest peak. More in this report.
Who said humans can't fly? Fred Fugen, Vincent Cott, and Aurélien Chattard of France put their wingsuits to test over the Mount Lebanon. Flown by the Lebanese Air Force, they hovered in a helicopter over Black Peak, the country's highest mountain, that towers over the famous cedars of Lebanon and many of the country's other iconic sites. The wingsuit flyers jumped out and soared through the Kadisha Valley and over the forest of the Cedars of God. They also enjoyed a bird's eye view of the 2 of the country's UNESCO World Heritage Sites. As the team's altitude was so low, it was a very technical and difficult jump to complete.
In China, tens of thousands of tourists and cast members gathered to celebrate the 5th birthday of Shanghai Disney Resort. More on this report.
The celebration featured appearances by 42 of Disney's most beloved characters, with tourists joining cast members to sing happy birthday in front of the iconic enchanted storybook castle.
I really like the atmosphere of Disneyland. Every time I come to see the parades and all kinds of performances, as well as Disney friends, I feel very happy.
A light show featuring 40 classic Disney movies was presented by 91 new lighting effects, 27,000 LED lights, 45 fountains, 27 fire effects, and 6 laser devices. In addition, a brand new live stage show called Mickey's Storybook Adventure made its debut at the Walt Disney Grand Theater. And a new friend is expected to come to Shanghai Disneyland this year.
We're always thinking about expansion and opportunities to innovate and bring new products to market. What we had to do was harness the creativity of the team here, the support from the local government, in order to create a protocol that was respecting the health and safety of our guests and still creating a magical experience. And that was so successful and effective that it was replicated in many parks around the world.
Since the resort opened to the public 5 years ago, it has seen over 83 million visits, generating a revenue of about $6.25 billion from tourism.
European stocks have pulled back as global markets react to the Federal Reserve's signal that rate hikes will come sooner than expected. London's FTSE is leading the losses, sliding 0.5%. Frankfurt's DAX and the Pan-European Stock 600 have slipped under the flat line. The CAC 40 in Paris and Italy's FTSE MIB have also dropped fractionally. Earlier, Asian stocks traded mixed, with mainland Chinese stocks and shares in Hong Kong gaining, while all other regional bourses shed. Ryanair and the owner of 3 major English airports are preparing to sue the UK government over its border policy. The United Kingdom's current international travel policy only allows passengers from less than a dozen states to avoid quarantine. The airline and Manchester Airport Group says that they will seek a judicial review over the transparency of the traffic light system. In a statement, the 2 companies said the way that the decisions are being made is undermining consumer confidence in the system. They said it makes it impossible for airports, airlines, and other travel companies to plan for the recovery of the international travel. The UK's Transport Ministry argues the system downgrades the risks of new variants. It said the government already gave £7 billion to support the industry. It's now time to take a look at the weather updates from around the world. For the latest news updates, you can follow us on our social media at indus.news.